In the shadow of medieval Europe, amid the clashing ambitions of empires, kingdoms, and mercantile republics, a hidden force rose along the rugged coastlines and rolling hills of what is now Croatia. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were knights, elite, secretive, and sworn to protect their homeland from the encroaching threats of Venice, Hungary, and eventually the Ottoman Empire. Their names are largely forgotten, buried in the annals of obscure chronicles. Yet their deeds shaped the survival of towns, trade routes, and even royal dynasties. The 14th century was a turbulent time for the Dalmatian coast and inland Croatia. Venice, the maritime powerhouse, sought control over ports and trade. Hungary, the regional kingdom, asserted claims over Croatian territories, while the Ottoman Empire in the east began creeping into the Balkans, its ambitions ominous and unstoppable. In this storm of political intrigue and military pressure, ordinary armies were insufficient. The Croatian nobles knew that only specialized, loyal, and fiercely trained warriors could defend the lands that were both their heritage and their destiny. These warriors were not knights in the sense of European chivalric fame, garbed in shining armor and participating in ceremonial tournaments. Instead, they were shadow knights, covert defenders of towns and hinterlands, masters of ambush and strategy, blending the ideals of honor with the ruthlessness demanded by survival. From the jagged cliffs of the Adriatic Islands to the dense forests of the interior, these knights moved like shadows, their presence unknown to most but their impact undeniable. Their training began at adolescence, often under the direct patronage of a noble house. Boys were taken from their families, taught horseback mastery, archery, and swordsmanship, and instructed in intelligence gathering, cryptography, and covert reconnaissance. Every lesson was designed for one purpose: to forge warriors capable of both defense and espionage. They learned to ride silently along mountain passes, infiltrate enemy camps, and strike decisively without warning. Legends tell of young recruits sent alone across Venetian territories to deliver critical intelligence, returning unharmed through forests that even seasoned mercenaries feared to traverse. These secret Croatian knights were bound by a code, a combination of fealty to the crown, protection of the people, and personal honor. But unlike the romanticized codes of Western knights, their ethics were tempered by the harsh realities of medieval warfare. A betrayal could mean death, not just for the traitor but for entire communities. Loyalty was absolute, secrecy sacred, and courage measured not in public displays, but in the silent fulfillment of dangerous missions that no chronicler dared to record. One of their earliest known missions involved the defense of the city of Zadar, a vital Adriatic port coveted by Venice. Venetian forces, with their ships and wealth, threatened to seize control, imposing tariffs that would cripple local trade. Croatian knights, in secret, coordinated with the city guards, slipping into Venetian supply lines at night, sabotaging food stores, cutting off reinforcements, and using hidden knowledge of the terrain to ambush the enemy. Venetian records from the time, sparse as they are, speak of phantom defenders, whose sudden strikes bewildered and demoralized their forces. Though the names of the knights were never recorded, their actions ensured Zadar remained under Croatian influence, a critical victory that preserved trade routes and local governance. These knights did not only fight foreign powers. They policed internal disputes, often acting as arbiters in feuds between noble families. In a time when blood feuds could destabilize entire regions, the intervention of a secretive, impartial force was invaluable. They quelled rebellions, protected villages from rogue mercenaries, and maintained a precarious balance of power that prevented the fragmentation of Croatian territories. In doing so, they earned both respect and fear. Respect from those they protected, fear from those who might challenge their authority. While their martial skills were formidable, intelligence was their true strength. Knights were trained to observe, memorize, and report. They would infiltrate enemy encampments disguised as merchants or pilgrims, mapping fortifications and uncovering weaknesses. This information was passed to Croatian nobles, allowing them to make strategic decisions far beyond the battlefield. The knights' combination of espionage and combat made them a force few outside the region could understand, let alone counter. The geopolitical stakes were high. Venice sought to dominate the Dalmatian coast, controlling maritime trade routes that linked the Mediterranean to Central Europe. Hungary claimed sovereignty over the Croatian crown, attempting to integrate the territory into its kingdom through both diplomacy and military pressure. Even the Ottoman Empire, still in its ascendant phase, posed a distant but growing threat, sending scouts and raiding parties into the Balkans. For Croatian rulers, the survival of their cities and lands depended on these clandestine warriors. Historians today piece together their stories through a combination of Venetian chronicles, local legends, and scattered letters from noble families. One account tells of a knight known only as the Hawk, who intercepted an Ottoman scouting party near Nin, capturing vital intelligence that delayed an invasion by months. Another story, passed down in oral tradition, describes a young knight who single-handedly saved a caravan of grain from Hungarian raiders, riding through a night storm to deliver it safely to Split. These tales, part myth and part history, reveal the duality of their existence: heroic, secretive, and crucial to Croatia's survival. The secret knights' influence extended beyond warfare. They were protectors of culture and knowledge, safeguarding manuscripts, church treasures, and local archives from looting. In an era when invading armies often destroyed what they could not control, these knights ensured that the intellectual and spiritual heritage of Croatian towns survived. Monasteries and libraries owed their survival, in part, to the vigilance of these hidden warriors, who risked life and limb to preserve the past for future generations. Perhaps their most remarkable skill was adaptability. They fought in forests and mountains, on narrow coastal paths, and in urban centers. Their tactics were fluid, tailored to the environment and the enemy. Against Venetian naval power, they focused on ambushes and sabotage. Against Hungarian knights, they used intelligence and terrain knowledge to outmaneuver superior forces. Against early Ottoman incursions, they combined guerrilla tactics with conventional combat, slowing the advance of a far larger empire. This versatility made them legends among those who knew of their deeds and nightmares to their adversaries. Yet, despite their achievements, these knights remained largely unknown outside Croatia. Their secrecy was both their power and their curse. Few chronicles recorded their names. Those who did often obscured identities to protect families and future operations. Unlike the famed knights of France or England, Croatian knights did not parade in tournaments or swear oaths to distant monarchs. They served quietly, invisibly, and without expectation of glory. Their reward was the survival of their homeland and the trust of those they defended. As the 14th century progressed, the threat from the Ottomans increased. Raids became more frequent, targeting villages and trade caravans. The Croatian knights intensified their efforts, forming networks that connected coastal cities to inland fortresses. They trained local militias, taught defensive techniques, and coordinated regional responses to enemy incursions. In doing so, they created a military infrastructure that, though hidden, rivaled that of more visible European powers. Stories from this period speak of audacious operations: knights scaling cliffs to destroy enemy artillery, infiltrating Venetian councils to misdirect diplomatic negotiations, and leading small forces against overwhelming odds. Each successful mission enhanced their reputation, building a mystique that grew with each retelling. For ordinary citizens, these knights were saviors. For invaders, they were ghosts, present one moment, vanished the next. By the end of the century, the Croatian knights had solidified their place in history, even if anonymously. They had defended cities, preserved trade, thwarted empires, and laid the groundwork for future resistance against Ottoman expansion. Their legacy was not monuments or statues, but the survival of a nation and the continuity of its culture and political autonomy. In the quiet hills and along the Adriatic coast, one can still imagine their shadows moving at dusk, silent, vigilant, and unrecognized by the world beyond. The story of Croatia's secret knights is a story of courage hidden in obscurity, of strategy and valor unseen by chroniclers, and of a nation's survival shaped by heroes who never sought fame. And as we unravel these tales today, we are reminded of the power of the hidden, the importance of secrecy in a world of danger, and the timeless truth that some of history's greatest defenders are never remembered by name, but their impact endures. The Croatian Knights of the 14th century were not born as heroes, they were forged. From the moment they were selected, often in early adolescence, they entered a world of discipline, danger, and secrecy. Their training grounds were hidden valleys, dense forests, and fortified castles where no outsider could see. Every aspect of their education was designed to create warriors capable of surviving and thriving in a world dominated by empires, mercenaries, and marauders. Their days began before sunrise. Under the watchful eyes of seasoned knights, young recruits learned to ride horses along the steep cliffs of Dalmatia, balancing agility with speed. They practiced swordsmanship with wooden blades first, then steel, sparring with partners whose skill often exceeded their own. Archery lessons required them to hit moving targets at varying distances, even while riding. The goal was precision under pressure, teaching patience, focus, and adaptability. A single mistake could mean death on the battlefield, and the instructors made certain the recruits understood this from the very beginning. But combat skills alone were not enough. Intelligence gathering was equally critical. Young knights were trained to observe without being seen, to memorize paths, faces, and patterns. They practiced reading maps, sketching terrain, and interpreting enemy movements. Often, recruits would be sent on simulated missions, infiltrating an occupied village, delivering secret messages, or discovering hidden supplies. Mistakes were punished, not with cruelty for its own sake, but to instill the understanding that failure in real operations could cost countless lives. The oaths they swore were solemn and binding. A knight pledged loyalty not just to a noble patron but to the safety of the people and the security of Croatian lands. This loyalty transcended personal gain, family allegiance, and even fear. Secrecy was paramount. Revealing their identities or the details of a mission was considered a betrayal worse than death. The initiation ceremonies were intentionally mysterious. In some accounts, recruits were blindfolded, led through forests at night, and asked to swear by symbols of Croatian heritage, altars, relics, or even the Adriatic Sea itself. The act was symbolic. The knights belonged not to themselves but to the land they were sworn to protect. Their first missions were both tests and lessons. A group of newly trained knights might be dispatched to protect a coastal caravan carrying essential supplies from Venetian raids. The young warriors would move under the cover of darkness, scouting ahead to identify enemy positions, setting traps, and ensuring the caravan's safety. Failure was not an option. Success, however, brought more than praise. It instilled confidence and forged bonds of trust that would last a lifetime. One such mission took place near the town of Šibenik. A Venetian fleet had been sighted off the coast, threatening to intercept a shipment of grain vital to local towns. A squad of young knights, led by an experienced mentor, set out at night. They navigated treacherous cliffs, moved silently through forests, and ambushed Venetian scouts who had grown complacent. The operation succeeded without a single casualty on the Croatian side, and the grain reached its destination, sustaining the population through a harsh winter. It was the first of many missions that would define their reputation as invisible defenders. The knights also undertook missions further inland, often under more dangerous circumstances. Villages threatened by Hungarian raiders required rapid, strategic action. Knights would coordinate defenses, train villagers in basic combat, and stage ambushes on raiding parties. In some cases, a handful of knights could repel forces many times their number simply through superior tactics, knowledge of the terrain, and psychological warfare. The fear they inspired often preceded them. Enemies learned to respect the shadows and the quiet whispers of Croatian warriors moving unseen. Training was never static. As threats evolved, so did the curriculum. When Ottoman raiders first appeared on the horizon, the knights adapted quickly, learning new combat techniques, incorporating early firearms, and studying enemy tactics. Simulated skirmishes with mounted Ottoman forces taught them how to anticipate cavalry charges, protect supply lines, and coordinate with local militias. Every battle, real or rehearsed, was an opportunity to refine skills, to innovate, and to prepare for the unpredictable chaos of war. Beyond combat, knights were taught diplomacy. In a region fragmented by shifting alliances, the ability to negotiate, spy, and influence was as important as mastery of sword and bow. Some knights disguised themselves as merchants or pilgrims, entering Venetian ports or Hungarian towns to gather intelligence. They learned to speak multiple languages, adopt local customs, and navigate political intrigue. These missions required subtlety. A single misstep could lead to execution, capture, or diplomatic disaster. Yet, when successful, the information they gathered could alter the course of entire campaigns. The secret knights also served as guardians of culture and knowledge. Monasteries, archives, and religious sites were often targets during times of war. The knights' missions included safeguarding manuscripts, religious relics, and critical records. In one legendary account, a small squad of knights evacuated ancient texts from a monastery under threat of Hungarian seizure, transporting them through forests and mountains to a safe location, preserving them for future generations. Such actions highlighted that their duty was not merely martial, it was also cultural and civilizational. Life as a knight was harsh, and camaraderie was essential. Recruits relied on each other for survival. Bonds formed in the crucible of training and early missions were unbreakable. Mentors passed down not only skills but wisdom, patience, observation, and the courage to act decisively when needed. In many ways, these young warriors became part of an extended family, bound together by loyalty, secrecy, and shared purpose. Yet, for all their skill, danger was ever present. Venetian patrols, Hungarian cavalry, and local bandits were constant threats. Missions could fail, sometimes with catastrophic consequences. Knights learned to accept risk as a constant companion, cultivating the mental resilience necessary to face overwhelming odds. They were trained to act decisively, strike hard, and disappear without leaving a trace, a philosophy that would define their operations for decades to come. The first significant inland operation occurred in the forests near Nin. A small Ustas-aligned mercenary band had been threatening Croatian villages, looting supplies, and terrorizing locals. The knights assembled a small force using the forest for cover. By night, they infiltrated the bandits' encampment, sabotaged weapons, and set fires in strategic locations. By dawn, the mercenaries had fled, leaving the villages unharmed. News of these missions spread quietly, creating legends of near-mythical warriors whose presence was felt more than seen. Their effectiveness relied on speed and unpredictability. Knights would move across regions, coordinating with local militias and noble houses, creating a web of protection that was invisible to outsiders. In a single week, a knight could travel from the Adriatic coast to inland valleys, complete reconnaissance, intercept enemy couriers, and return home before anyone suspected their presence. This mobility, combined with rigorous training and intelligence gathering, made them the backbone of Croatian defense. By the end of their initial training period, the knights were not just warriors. They were strategists, spies, and protectors of their people. Their first missions tested every skill they had learned: combat proficiency, stealth, intelligence, diplomacy, and resilience. Each mission reinforced their understanding that being a secret knight was not about glory. It was about the survival and sovereignty of Croatia itself. Their early successes cemented the knights' reputation. While most of Europe remained unaware of their existence, within Croatian territories, their influence was undeniable. Trade routes were protected, towns survived sieges, and local populations came to trust an unseen hand guarding them. The Knights' network would expand over time, adapting to new threats and ensuring that Croatia could withstand pressures from powerful neighbors. As the 14th century advanced, the Knights matured into an elite corps capable of facing not only regional powers but the earliest incursions of the Ottoman Empire. The foundations laid during their training and first missions would prove critical in the decades to come. They had learned the art of survival, the discipline of secrecy, and the power of strategy. Each oath taken, each mission completed, prepared them for the challenges that would define the medieval history of Croatia. And so, the secret knights, young, disciplined, and fearless, stood as the unseen guardians of a nation. In forests, on hills, along rivers, and across coasts, their shadows moved silently, leaving no trace, yet ensuring that Croatian towns and people survived in a world teetering on the brink of war. Their story was only beginning, but the foundation had been set. Courage tempered by intelligence, loyalty forged in fire, and a commitment to protect their homeland at all costs. By the mid-14th century, the secret Croatian Knights had moved beyond training and minor missions. Their reputation, though hidden from the broader European stage, had begun to echo across the Dalmatian coast and inland territories. Venice, seeking to expand its maritime dominion, increasingly clashed with Croatian cities, while Hungary exerted pressure to consolidate political control over Croatian lands. It was in this turbulent environment that the Knights' skills would be tested on a larger, more dangerous scale. Their first major confrontation came near the port of Šibenik, where Venetian ambitions threatened to monopolize trade routes critical to Croatian survival. Venetian forces, confident in their naval superiority, assumed they could coerce the city into submission. The Knights, however, had anticipated the threat. Using their intimate knowledge of the terrain, they orchestrated a series of ambushes along supply lines, disabling Venetian reinforcements and intercepting critical communications. Under cover of darkness, small squads infiltrated enemy camps, sabotaging ships and burning provisions. The raids were surgical, precise, and devastatingly effective, forcing the Venetians to retreat and reconsider their approach. Meanwhile, inland conflicts demanded a different set of tactics. Hungarian forces, intent on asserting dominance, sent mounted patrols to secure villages and disrupt local governance. The Knights responded with cunning and speed. In one notable instance, a squad of 5 Knights lured a Hungarian detachment into a narrow mountain pass. Using traps and knowledge of the terrain, they immobilized the heavily armed patrol, neutralized key leaders, and freed captured villagers. The operation, though executed by a small team, demonstrated the Knights' ability to manipulate larger forces and turn disadvantage into advantage. Alliances with local nobility were crucial during these confrontations. Croatian lords, recognizing the value of the Knights, provided resources, intelligence, and political cover. Knights often acted as intermediaries, ensuring that rival factions within Croatia cooperated against common enemies. Their presence in council chambers was subtle but influential. Whispered warnings and secret reports allowed nobles to make informed decisions, avoiding costly errors and consolidating regional stability. Espionage became increasingly central to their operations. Venetian records, though incomplete, occasionally mention unknown informants who anticipated movements, intercepted messages, or sabotaged supply lines. Knights disguised as merchants or traveling monks would infiltrate enemy strongholds, returning with intelligence that proved pivotal in shaping defensive strategies. In one famous case, a knight known only by the title the Falcon uncovered a Venetian plan to besiege Zadar, providing the city with just enough time to reinforce walls, evacuate civilians, and set traps for invaders. The siege, though fierce, ultimately failed, highlighting the indispensable role of covert operations in Croatian defense. The Knights' mastery of guerrilla tactics gave them a distinct advantage. Unlike conventional armies, which relied on strength in numbers and direct confrontation, the Croatian Knights leveraged speed, stealth, and surprise. They struck quickly, inflicted maximum damage, and vanished before retaliation could be mounted. Coastal raids, forest ambushes, and nighttime sabotage became hallmarks of their strategy. Their enemies, often larger and better equipped, found themselves outmaneuvered and demoralized, unsure whether they faced a human force or the specter of ghosts. Their influence extended beyond pure military action. Knights worked to secure critical infrastructure, protect trade routes, and maintain communication lines between cities and fortresses. In one operation along the Cetina River, Knights defended a convoy of supplies from a combined Venetian-Hungarian raiding party. Using river crossings, hidden paths, and ambush points, they ensured the safe passage of goods essential for local survival. This blend of military skill and logistical acumen underscored their strategic value and cemented their status as more than mere warriors. They were the backbone of Croatian resilience. One of the most daring missions involved disrupting Venetian naval dominance along the Dalmatian coast. Knights, disguised as fishermen, would infiltrate ports at night, tampering with ships' rigging, setting small fires, and planting false signals to mislead navigators. These acts of sabotage, though minor in isolation, collectively hindered Venetian operations, buying time for Croatian cities to strengthen defenses and coordinate alliances. The ingenuity displayed in these operations highlighted the Knights' adaptability, intelligence, and commitment to their homeland. The human element of these missions cannot be overlooked. Knights often risked their lives to protect civilians, evacuate vulnerable families, or rescue captured villagers. Their actions inspired loyalty, gratitude, and in some cases, fear. Local populations came to trust the invisible hand that guided them through crises, while enemies feared the unpredictable interventions of these secretive warriors. Tales of knights who single-handedly defended entire villages against overwhelming forces became part of local folklore, blending history and legend. Internal Croatian conflicts also demanded attention. Rival noble families occasionally vied for control over key territories, threatening stability. Knights acted as mediators, using their authority and reputation to enforce peace. They would negotiate ceasefires, protect neutral parties, and ensure that local disputes did not escalate into civil wars. Their intervention preserved both lives and resources, demonstrating that their role extended beyond combat to governance and social order. As their operations intensified, the Knights developed sophisticated communication networks. Couriers, signal fires, and coded messages allowed them to coordinate actions across vast distances, linking coastal cities with inland fortresses. This network enabled rapid response to threats, efficient distribution of intelligence, and seamless integration with local militias. In essence, the Knights created an early form of strategic coordination that rivaled larger armies, proving that secrecy and efficiency could outweigh sheer numbers. The arrival of the Ottoman threat added a new dimension to their challenges. Raiding parties and scouts began to appear in the eastern regions, testing Croatian defenses. The Knights adapted quickly, studying enemy tactics, fortifying key positions, and coordinating regional resistance. Early skirmishes with Ottoman forces demonstrated their ability to face a formidable and unfamiliar adversary, blending traditional combat with guerrilla tactics and strategic planning. Each encounter provided critical lessons, refining their approach and preparing them for the larger conflicts to come. Stories from this period are both numerous and enigmatic. Chronicles speak of knights who scaled cliffs to cut enemy supply lines, infiltrated fortified camps under disguise, and used psychological warfare to sow confusion and fear. Their feats were often recorded anonymously, leaving behind a trail of mystery and admiration. Villagers would whisper of shadowy figures who appeared when danger loomed and vanished before dawn, ensuring survival without revealing their identities. The cultural impact of these missions was significant. By protecting towns, trade, and heritage sites, the Knights safeguarded the continuity of Croatian civilization. Churches, libraries, and marketplaces survived invasions, allowing communities to thrive despite external pressures. Their actions preserved not only lives but also the identity and resilience of a nation under threat. Through their early conflicts and ambushes, the secret Croatian Knights established a legacy of adaptability, courage, and strategic brilliance. They demonstrated that a small, well-trained, and disciplined force could influence the course of regional history, challenging larger powers and securing the survival of their homeland. Each victory, each successful mission, reinforced the principles instilled during their training: loyalty, secrecy, intelligence, and valor. By the end of these early campaigns, the Knights were no longer novices. They had evolved into a formidable corps, capable of confronting multiple threats simultaneously, coordinating with nobles and militias, and executing missions that required both physical prowess and mental acuity. Their influence extended across the Dalmatian coast and into inland Croatia, forming a protective network that would endure for decades. Their story, though largely hidden from the wider world, was becoming legend among those who lived under their protection. Villagers, merchants, and local lords alike understood the presence of a silent guardian force that intervened when danger loomed. The Croatian Knights had transformed from trainees into master strategists, their deeds a testament to the power of discipline, secrecy, and unwavering loyalty. And as the 14th century drew on, These secret knights prepared for challenges even greater than Venice or Hungary. The Ottoman Empire loomed ever closer, a force that would test every skill they had honed, every alliance they had forged, and every ounce of courage within them. Their journey had begun with training and small missions. It would continue into epic confrontations that would shape the fate of Croatia for generations. As the 14th century gave way to the 15th, a new and far more dangerous adversary emerged on the horizon: the Ottoman Empire. The once distant threat had evolved into a formidable force, with seasoned warriors, disciplined armies, and relentless ambition. The Dalmatian coast, inland fortresses, and strategic towns of Croatia were now at risk from a power unlike any the secret knights had faced before. The lessons of Venice and Hungary would be tested in new ways, demanding every ounce of skill, courage, and ingenuity that these elite warriors had cultivated. The first signs of the Ottoman advance were subtle yet alarming. Scouts reported small raiding parties, probing defenses and disrupting trade. While these initial incursions seemed minor, the knights understood the significance. The Ottomans were mapping the terrain, learning the vulnerabilities of Croatian defenses, and preparing for larger campaigns. The secret knights responded by tightening networks of surveillance, fortifying key positions, and coordinating local militias for rapid response. Every village, river crossing, and mountain pass became part of a complex defensive web. One of the earliest confrontations occurred near the city of Nin. Ottoman raiders, numbering in the hundreds, sought to plunder supplies and assert dominance. A squad of knights, outnumbered but well-prepared, chose to strike at night. Using the dense forest for cover, they laid traps and ambushed the invaders with precision. Each knight understood that survival depended not on brute force but on strategy, timing, and the element of surprise. By dawn, the raiders had been routed, leaving behind supplies, horses, and a reputation of invincibility for the Croatian defenders. The knights' mastery of terrain proved decisive in many battles. The rugged mountains, deep rivers, and narrow valleys of Croatia, once considered obstacles, became instruments of defense. Knights would guide enemy forces into ambush points, cut off retreats, and control choke points that amplified the effectiveness of smaller forces. One legendary operation involved a river crossing near the Krka waterfalls, where knights used hidden platforms and ropes to attack a heavily armed Ottoman unit from multiple angles. The result was a decisive victory, despite overwhelming odds, demonstrating that knowledge and cunning could overcome numerical superiority. Sacrifice became an inseparable part of their existence. Many knights lost their lives in the defense of villages and fortresses, often in missions where survival was improbable. Their deaths, though tragic, inspired others and solidified the moral fabric of the order. Chronicles, though sparse, mention unnamed warriors who held bridges against advancing Ottoman forces, buying crucial time for civilians to evacuate. These acts of valor, performed without expectation of fame, became the stuff of local legend. Villages commemorated fallen knights with stories, songs, and whispered tales, ensuring that their heroism endured even if their names were lost to history. Strategic intelligence was critical in countering Ottoman incursions. Knights infiltrated enemy camps, observed troop movements, and intercepted messages. One daring mission involved a small team disguising themselves as traders to enter an Ottoman garrison. They gathered critical information about supply lines, troop strengths, and planned raids, returning to Croatian leaders in time to prevent a major assault. Such operations were perilous, requiring impeccable timing, nerves of steel, and the ability to improvise under extreme pressure. Success meant survival and strategic advantage. Failure could result in massacre. The coastal cities faced their own unique challenges. Ottoman naval scouts and raiding parties threatened ports, trade vessels, and coastal settlements. Knights, in collaboration with local militias, adapted tactics to confront these threats. They used fast boats, hidden coves, and underwater sabotage to neutralize enemy operations. In some instances, knights would sabotage ships at night, cut anchor lines, or mislead navigators with false markers. These operations required creativity, precision, and absolute secrecy. The Ottomans, though formidable, were repeatedly frustrated by these shadowy defenders who seemed to appear from nowhere. Cavalry engagements inland demanded coordination and discipline. Knights organized defensive formations, trained local forces in rapid response tactics, and exploited terrain for maximum advantage. A famous skirmish near the inland town of Bihać saw a small Croatian force repel a larger Ottoman contingent by luring them into narrow valleys and using crossfire from hidden positions. The battle ended with minimal losses for the defenders and heavy casualties for the invaders. This victory reinforced the effectiveness of combining small, elite forces with local knowledge and guerrilla-style tactics. Morale and psychology played a critical role. Knights understood that fear could be a weapon as effective as steel. Night raids, sudden ambushes, and the strategic use of misinformation created the impression of omnipresent defenders. Ottoman forces often overestimated Croatian strength, hesitant to advance into unknown territories patrolled by unseen adversaries. This psychological warfare, coupled with tangible victories, amplified the Knights' influence far beyond their numbers. In addition to military confrontations, the Knights had to protect critical infrastructure and cultural heritage. Fortresses, monasteries, and archives were frequent targets. Knights would organize evacuations, secure treasures, and reinforce structures to withstand sieges. In one memorable episode, a small team defended a monastery perched on a cliff against a determined Ottoman raid, using rock slides, hidden traps, and archery to protect both the monks and invaluable manuscripts. Their actions ensured that cultural identity and historical records survived the chaos of war. The alliances forged by knights were equally vital. Coordinating with local nobles, city officials, and even rival factions, they created a network of resistance that could respond dynamically to threats. They acted as advisors, strategists, and enforcers, ensuring that every regional effort was aligned with the larger goal of defending Croatian lands. This coordination turned scattered, isolated settlements into an integrated defense system capable of resisting superior forces. As the Ottoman threat intensified, the Knights adapted further. They incorporated intelligence from prior engagements, refined their ambush techniques, and developed contingency plans for every conceivable scenario. They trained continuously, learning from each encounter, and instilling the lessons in new recruits. The order's survival depended on this constant evolution, and understanding that stagnation would mean annihilation. By the end of this period, the secret Croatian Knights had transformed from a small, covert force into a legendary corps capable of confronting one of the most powerful empires of the age. Their victories, sacrifices, and strategic brilliance preserved Croatian autonomy, safeguarded civilians, and ensured that cultural and economic life could continue under the shadow of looming empires. Their legend was cemented not in public acclaim, but in the survival and prosperity of the lands they defended. Stories from villages, coastal towns, and monasteries told of knights who appeared when hope seemed lost, of strategic brilliance that turned battles, and of courage that inspired entire communities. Though their names were rarely recorded, their actions shaped history. These knights had proven that secrecy, skill, and unwavering loyalty could counter even the mightiest of empires. Yet, even as victories accumulated, the challenges grew. Each successful defense against the Ottomans led to larger and more sophisticated counterattacks. The knights knew that the coming years would demand even greater sacrifices, more daring operations, and unbreakable cohesion. Their legend was still unfolding, a narrative of heroism hidden from most eyes, but visible to all who depended on their vigilance. And so, the Croatian Knights of the 14th and early 15th centuries continued their silent crusade. They faced the relentless advance of the Ottoman Empire with courage, ingenuity, and selflessness. Every ambush, every daring raid, every life-risking mission contributed to the preservation of their homeland. They had become symbols of resilience, proving that a small, dedicated, and strategic force could defy even the greatest threats. As the 15th century unfolded, the secret Croatian Knights had cemented their place not merely as warriors but as legendary defenders of a nation. Their deeds, though often unrecorded in official chronicles, lived on in whispers among villagers, in the strategic fortifications of towns, and in the cultural memory of Croatia itself. From the Dalmatian coast to the inland valleys, every stone of a fortified city, every hidden path through a forest, and every successful defense bore the mark of these unseen guardians. Their influence extended far beyond the battlefield. The knights had become symbols of resilience, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty. They demonstrated that courage, when combined with strategy and knowledge of the land, could outmatch even the most powerful adversaries. Their methods, ambushes, espionage, sabotage, and psychological warfare would inspire future generations of Croatian defenders, laying the groundwork for the military doctrines of later centuries. Local communities revered them in secret. Songs, tales, and legends spoke of warriors who appeared at the brink of disaster, who vanished without leaving a trace, and whose presence alone deterred invaders. Children grew up hearing stories of knights who fought for the survival of their villages, who protected sacred sites, and who upheld justice in times of chaos. This folklore, passed down through generations, preserved the memory of the knights long after their campaigns ended. The knights' dedication to protecting culture and knowledge was particularly noteworthy. During Ottoman incursions, monasteries, archives, and libraries were at risk. The secret knights took extraordinary measures to safeguard manuscripts, religious relics, and civic records. They devised hidden caches, secret routes, and contingency plans to ensure that the intellectual and spiritual heritage of Croatia survived. These efforts allowed the continuity of learning, faith, and civic identity, ensuring that the nation could rebuild even after devastating attacks. Training continued to be a cornerstone of their success. Even as older knights matured into mentors, they passed down their expertise to new recruits. Young warriors learned not only to fight but to observe, strategize, and adapt. They were taught that the greatest victories often came without a single visible confrontation, that the power of stealth, intelligence, and timing could accomplish what brute force could not. This philosophy created an enduring culture of innovation and adaptability within the order. Alliances forged during earlier conflicts remained vital. Nobles, merchants, and local militias who had benefited from the knights' protection continued to support them with resources, intelligence, and sanctuary. The network of cooperation that the knights had established allowed them to respond swiftly to new threats, coordinate defenses across vast territories, and maintain stability in a region beset by external pressures. The knights' influence was subtle but undeniable. They shaped political and military outcomes without ever seeking recognition. The psychological impact of the knights on their enemies cannot be overstated. Ottoman raiders, Venetian commanders, and Hungarian patrols alike spoke in fear of elusive forces that struck suddenly and vanished just as quickly. The unpredictability of these defenders created hesitation, lowered morale, and often caused enemy forces to overestimate Croatian strength. The secret knights understood that war was as much about perception as it was about physical confrontation. They wielded fear and uncertainty as tools of strategic advantage. Even in peacetime, the legacy of the knights endured. They maintained vigilance along critical routes, ensured the safety of trade caravans, and acted as arbiters in disputes. Their presence stabilized regions, allowing commerce, agriculture, and culture to flourish. Towns that had once been vulnerable to raiders and invaders found protection in the silent shadow of the knights. They were guardians not only of territory but of society itself, ensuring that Croatia could thrive despite the challenges of the age. The knights' courage and discipline inspired a code of ethics that influenced later military orders. Their principles, loyalty, secrecy, adaptability, and service to the greater good, became the blueprint for future Croatian defenders. In times of occupation, rebellion, or foreign invasion, the ethos of the secret knights provided a moral and strategic foundation for resistance. Their story demonstrated that a small, dedicated force, guided by intelligence and courage, could preserve the identity and autonomy of a nation. Their legacy also lived on in the landscape itself. Fortresses strengthened under their guidance, hidden paths they used for strategic maneuvers, and secret caches of supplies became part of Croatia's enduring military architecture. Historians and archaeologists studying medieval fortifications often encounter traces of these strategic innovations, a testament to the ingenuity and foresight of the knights. Their influence was tangible, embedded in the very terrain they had mastered. As the Ottoman threat ebbed and flowed over subsequent decades, the Secret Knights adapted, refined their techniques, and continued to protect their homeland. Their operations became more sophisticated, incorporating lessons learned from countless skirmishes, ambushes, and defensive campaigns. They were not static warriors. They evolved with the times, ensuring that Croatian territories remained resilient against an ever-changing array of threats. Yet, their greatest victories were often invisible. Unlike celebrated generals or kings, the Secret Knights did not seek fame or titles. Their satisfaction lay in knowing that lives were saved, towns were preserved, and the Croatian way of life endured. Their greatest triumphs were measured not in monuments or accolades, but in the quiet survival of their people. It was this humility, combined with unmatched skill, that made their story both remarkable and enduring. Legends recount countless acts of heroism. In one story, a lone knight held a mountain pass against a force 10 times his size, delaying an advancing army long enough for civilians to flee. In another, a small team infiltrated a fortified city to prevent the execution of captured villagers, risking everything to save innocents. These tales, though sometimes embellished, reflect the ethos and courage that define the order. Every mission, every ambush, and every calculated risk contributed to the larger narrative of resilience and protection. Today, the impact of the secret Croatian Knights can still be felt. Their strategies influenced later military doctrines, their stories inspire historical fiction and cinematic portrayals, and their ethos continues to resonate in discussions of loyalty, courage, and duty. They exemplify how a small, determined, and disciplined force can shape the destiny of a nation, leaving an indelible mark on history. The lessons from their era are timeless. Adaptability, intelligence, courage, and ethical commitment are qualities that transcend centuries. The Secret Knights remind us that true heroism often occurs in the shadows, where recognition is scarce but impact is profound. Their story teaches that even in the face of overwhelming odds, dedication and strategic thinking can safeguard communities, preserve culture, and influence the course of history. As we reflect on their achievements, it becomes clear that the secret Croatian Knights were more than warriors. They were guardians of a nation, protectors of heritage, and exemplars of human ingenuity and courage. Their shadows linger in the forests, mountains, and coastal paths they once defended, a silent testament to resilience, skill, and unwavering loyalty. Their legacy invites us to explore history beyond the obvious. It challenges us to recognize the unseen actors whose courage shaped nations, whose sacrifices ensured survival, and whose strategies laid the foundation for future generations. The Secret Knights of Croatia embody the idea that greatness often thrives in secrecy, and that the most profound impacts are not always recorded in official chronicles but are felt in the continued survival and prosperity of a people. And so, their story concludes, not with the clamor of victory parades or the acclaim of kings, but with the quiet endurance of a nation that survived and thrived under their protection. The Croatian Knights remain a reminder that courage, strategy, and unwavering dedication can alter the course of history, leaving lessons that resonate across centuries. If you were inspired by the bravery and cunning of these secret knights, imagine what other hidden heroes may have shaped history in ways we have yet to discover. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's uncover more untold stories together.